310,000 subscribers. That is ridiculous. Thanks very much. Welcome back to SwitchUp and to a list that I love making. The new most addictive games on Nintendo Switch that I've been playing. What are they? Well, let's find out. First up then, we've got a game that's only recently come out on Switch, and that's Pirate Outlaws. This is a roguelike pirate-based deck builder, and it was developed by Fabled Games. It's also on mobile, but the version you get over there is quite different in terms of progression. The console one is much better. There are 3 different game modes. Your standard one, which essentially has you go on different runs through certain scenarios that you gradually unlock, but there's an arena mode in here, which is almost like a game on its own. It's unbelievably addictive and it unlocks a lot of the different cards. Now, as far as the gameplay goes, it's essentially a standard deck builder in the vein of Slay the Spire. It features over 60 different boss fights, and it has all of the downloadable content and DLC that's been released since it first came out on other platforms. There's potentially hundreds and hundreds of hours of gameplay here, but just be warned, it will suck you in, and like many of you who bought it last week, it shall not release you for a very long time. If you want to check out more on that one, I'll pop a link to our full video down in the description. Then if we go to something completely different, we have Remnant from the Ashes. If you're familiar with the genre, you'll know that the previous game, Chronos Before the Ashes, is also on Switch, but Remnant is very different. This one really focuses on fast-paced, ranged combat. You have different weapons that you can modify and upgrade. You can do drop-in, drop-out co-op with up to 3 of you. And the world also changes each time you play, which adds a ton of replayability. If you cross something like Gears of War and Dark Souls, you have a good idea of the mix that you've got here. It still has stamina-based dodging and rolling, but being able to aim down the sights of a rifle and just blow the head off of an enemy, it's really easy to pick up and play. I can't stress to you just how good this one is on Switch. Yes, I know a few people said it doesn't look as good as the PC version, and also the sky is blue and the earth is a sphere, but it still looks more than good enough for me, and it also runs well. In terms of structure, you're let out quite early on, and while there is some freedom, it also has some linearity. As I mentioned, the world slightly shifts, but it still has the structure of a storyline and a narrative that you follow, but the layout of the stages changes each time you start a new game, which actually does really help to keep things interesting. If you enjoy cover-based shooters, it's brilliant solo, but I must say, it's probably one of my favourite co-op games on Switch. Then we've got Have a Nice Death, which has only recently come out as well. This is a more traditional roguelite, and it was created by Magic Design Studios. As the title suggests, you play as Death, but unfortunately his colleagues have turned against him, and you have to move floor to floor and eliminate them. Now, as with any good roguelite, there are different power-ups that you can get along the way, and each run is slightly varied. The combat itself is very swift, and it's easy to pick up and play. Initially, I wasn't too taken with this one, but it really did grow on me and it got its claws in. I think the main way it did that was by providing a lot of really interesting permanent unlocks, so that each run you really felt like you were unlocking more, with more weapons becoming available, and very unique ones with different movesets, and learning the different bosses that you'll meet along the way. Yeah, I really like this one. I think it could benefit from some form of multiplayer update in the future, but this is single player only. Then we've got the incredible effort, which is Vernal Edge, created by Hallow Penguin Team, which essentially consists of a couple of mates. It's a labour of love. It's taken them years and years to finally get it out, and it's received seriously high praise across the board. I was blown away with how good it is. It's a Metroidvania that takes place across several floating islands. Now, that in and of itself isn't overly impressive, but what is the level design. The structure and construction of each of these stages is so meticulous. There's a real flow to them, and the way you unlock abilities has been refined to a T. And then you've got your airship, which will shift the perspective to this 3-dimensional, almost PlayStation environment with a mapping system, and this expands as well. You can see the islands that you can travel to. It does that thing that a lot of games forget to do, and that's create something that's truly enjoyable and fun. Can't recommend this one highly enough. Please do check out our full review. A brilliant, brilliant game, and well worth the asking price. While it didn't launch with a physical, I am more than confident that it will eventually find one, and that whole thing fits into a Diddy 760 megs. I wouldn't normally put a DLC in this list, but I feel like I kinda have to. We've got Dead Cells Return to Castlevania from Evil Empire, and the amount of love and attention that went into this is unbelievable. You can tell they really did their research into the series and brought that aesthetic across. As I said in our full video, this feels like Dead Cells rather than Castlevania. I know that might sound really obvious, but I think there were some people that were expecting kind of a full Castlevania game within the Dead Cells world. That's not to say that wouldn't work, because it would be amazing. But here you've still got your standard roguelite, but obviously some new weapons introduced, new boss fights, and a new route through that same map. So you can start off from the sewers and then make your way into the castle, or you can make your way from the very last standard Dead Cells stage. The Dead Cells combat is as slick and fast as ever. It is as brutally difficult as ever, I'm not gonna lie. And you have weapons split into 3 different colour categories, one focusing on health, one damage, and one predominantly ranged. There's a reason many people hold this as their greatest roguelite of all time, and you can usually find a pack now that includes the base game and all of the DLCs they've released since it came out. Cannot recommend it enough. Then we've got our next deck builder, and it's brand new, it's just come out, and for many of you it won't have come out for a couple of days yet. But it's Wildfrost. Now I've been playing through this one, it's published by Chucklefish, and it's developed by Deadpan Games, and my goodness is this formula almost perfection. Now I said it with the pirate game, it has a very Slay the Spire feel to it, but for me this almost combines Slay the Spire and Rogue Legacy 2 into one package. And it has that deceptively simplistic, cutesy art style. Now the battling system's gonna feel very familiar, but the combat itself is actually quite cool because it's almost like every encounter is its own encapsulated mini-fight, including a boss, as you'll have to fight through the waves and then fight the boss enemy. Yes, you'll be improving your deck and adding new cards to it, including new companion cards, and you can even upgrade those using different charms. And it's a run-based game, but between runs you'll return to your town, which is known as Snowdwell, and can be upgraded, improved, and that's where it feels like Rogue Legacy 2, whereas in that game you'd build up your castle. Here you build up the town and improve it, but you get to see that in real time. There are also daily runs and endless modes, but be warned, I would genuinely warn you about this one. Once those hooks are in, it's game over. It's got me already, but yeah, really enjoy it. It's just 720 megabytes and definitely deserves its spot on this list. And on to something again completely different, and it's No Man's Sky, which definitely deserves its place on this list. This is currently on sale as of the making of this video, that being April the 7th, and it's had another new patch this week. They have brought the performance up on this one so far beyond what anyone thought was possible on Switch. It initially launched with a 30 FPS, reasonable cap, but it was all over the shop when you looked back at your base and things like that. But they've managed to make it much improved over its original performance. Then they're constantly adding in new features and items and free things that you'll never have to pay for, but you can benefit from. If you're not sure with how the game works, it has several different game modes, from a standard one which acts as a hybrid survival. If you die you can still come back, you can build up your base, find new items, find new planets, you get to name everything you find, and there are some quest lines in there as well. But then you have things like a survival mode, which is brutally difficult. There's one, I think, in here where you can literally have one life, and if you die, it's over. And as I say, Hello Games are constantly improving it. Now, what I will say is, for those who've never played this or experienced it, in terms of the overall feel, think more along the lines of Minecraft, in that you create your own adventure as you go for much of the game. If that doesn't appeal to you, then this might not. But for everyone else, once it's got its hooks into you and there's that feeling of progression and constantly moving to different planets, buying new ships, trading with people, uncovering secrets, before you know it, hundreds and hundreds of hours will have gone by, and it will feel like it was worthwhile. And I guess that's the point of all the games on this list. They might be super addictive, but it does feel like your time was actually well spent. Then you've got Mortal Shell, which is a Souls-like, and I don't actually want to talk about the main game. The main game has a standard story. It has quite a cool mechanic where you can get knocked out of your mortal shell, and then if you can get back to it, you can restore your life. But it also has a roguelite mode included with it. Well, it has in the complete edition. This is called the Virtuous Cycle, and it enables you to choose one of the different builds, as there are different shells essentially that have different weapons and skills, and you can mix and match these up and then head out on different runs. This mode on its own is worth the price of admission. It's unbelievably compelling. You access it from the tower, and it will basically place different random enemies, boss encounters, and events within a version of the same world. But my word, it's so much fun. Mortal Shell was brought to us by Cold Symmetry, a very fun game, and it does have a cracking soundtrack as well. From one genre to the next, we have Chained Echoes. I don't think anyone was expecting this to be quite as good as it was. It's in many ways an old school, turn-based RPG, but it has some outstanding combat, an incredibly well written storyline, and it's the side quests that I remember. Things like fighting a weird shish kebab creature. And I know some people didn't like the traversal when you unlock your mech suits, but I thought that was very cool. You have an airship as well that you go around in. I mean, an RPG without an airship, that wouldn't be right. And it all came from the mind of almost, I think it was one guy. He was inspired by the classics of old, and he wanted to recreate something that felt genuinely fresh and new, and I think he's mostly done that. Now the combat is very difficult, to the point where it can sometimes feel like, hey, is this unfair? Is it weighted too much in the other direction? But one, there's an accessibility option that makes it a little bit easier, and two, it's one of those where you have to get the right strategy for each individual fight. You can't just go in the same way, spamming attacks and hoping you're going to get the same result. It took me a long time to finally figure that out. I was stuck on one boss for 3 hours, but then I realized actually I needed to use a very specific strategy to beat him. Now whether you like that or you'd prefer it to be much easier, I guess that's going to be the defining factor to your experience, but once you've got it, oh my goodness. I don't think I stopped playing this one for more than around a couple of hours for the 30 or 40 hours it took to finish. Absolutely loved it. I'll finish with perhaps one of the best games that I played last year, and it's still probably the one that has me most addicted. It's Rogue Legacy 2. This has a very cool ancestral system, and it's developed by Celador Games. How it works is, you start off as a new ancestor, so you get to choose one of 3 that are displayed on the screen, and they'll have different skills, abilities, and traits. Some of these traits might involve them being very, very small, or very large but slow, and then you go on your runs, leaving your hometown area, and then entering what is a very large and continuous map. This changes each time you have a new player, so let's say you started a brand new profile. You would never do the same area exactly, but there are some skills that you can unlock which will lock an area, if that makes sense. So let's say you entered the castle area. For each run or each ancestor that will change in terms of its layout, but you can unlock a skill that keeps it the same. What this achieves is the best of both worlds when it comes to things like procedural generation, because if you find a good area you can then lock it and keep it for your subsequent runs if you have the aforementioned ability. Then all the treasure and loot that you've gained can be carried over into building up your town, and it looks so cool. It will add new shops into it, new upgrades, new abilities, and yeah, for me, in terms of almost perfect loops, Rogue Legacy 2 has been a bit too overlooked by a lot of people. I absolutely loved it. The whole thing fits into a 1.2 gigabyte download, I think, and it is one that should be in your Addictive Games collection for sure. Alright, that's me done. Let me know down in the comments what games you've been playing or ones that you'd recommend. I'm currently working on a new All Patched Up episode. If you don't know what that is, it's where we revisit games that were, let's be honest, launched with some issues to see if they've been improved. If you want to check that out, I'll pop a link to that as well in the description. And if you enjoy the channel, then consider sticking around. Once again, a big thanks for 310,000 subscribers. Go check out our little shop, www.switchup.gg, where our membership will be launching very live on there, and that will get you like a little loyalty program with discounts the more games you buy and things like that. To all of you, thanks, and for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!